The Echo Chamber, brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Echo Chamber. I'm Maya Pawinska-Sims, the Holmes Report's EMEA editor, and I'm very pleased to be joined in a pretty chilly London today by two of the most creative people in the business. Frank PR's founder and managing partner Andrew Bloch and his co-managing partner Alex Grier. Welcome both to the Echo Chamber.
Thank you for having us.
Now to introduce you both a bit more properly, Andrew, you set up Frank with Graham Goodkind in 2000.
I did.
After working at agencies including the legendary Lynn Franks PR and Ketchum. Alex, you've been at Frank since 2005, so like forever. And you were at Shine for 5 years before that.
That's right.
And together you look after a team of around 70 guys now, guys and girls. And your clients include Direct Line, Skoda, Nestle, Paddy Power, Chessington. Who else do you want to chuck in there?
Go on, Alex. You're better at remembering.
Well, so we've been doing some work with Huawei.
Oh, cool.
Recently, who are great. Been a lot of fun. We've just done a brilliant campaign that we'll probably talk about a little bit later for Coty/Rimmel.
Okay.
Which has been excellent. We're very proud of. So yeah, and probably a few others that we'll come on to talk about as we go through.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the work later. So it's a big year for you. Frank has come of age. Happy 18th birthday. You're all legal now.
Yes.
How has the agency evolved in that time? Andrew, I'll turn to you first since you were there at the off.
I mean, in some ways, it's unrecognisable from the day we started with kind of a couple of us sat around a desk with no clients and nothing to do. And then in other ways, it's completely transformed. But I think the principles of what we set out to do and the ethos of the agency have remained exactly the same. So the concept of talkability and the ability to get others doing your best marketing for you by talking, tweeting, writing about your campaigns, that's still a part of it. It's just how you do it that has changed.
And what are you most proud of that you've achieved in that last 18 years?
It's a question I always find really difficult to answer, and I think I'm always most proud of the last thing that we've done, because I just think that in this business you just don't have time to sort of stop too much, and I always think you should never get too high on the highs, too low on the lows, and that just means the thing I'm most proud of is always the last thing that we've done. But you know, there have been some amazing milestones in the agency, which, you know, when we were 18, it did force us to stop for 5 minutes and look back, and you think, wow, done quite a lot.
Yeah, well, the industry's changed quite a lot. Alex, what have you seen since you joined Frank in terms of the agency itself and the industry? So
I think the big change was when I joined, there were about 12 of us in one office in Camden.
It's cosy.
Which was cosy. And now we're 3 offices in the UK, so London, Manc and Merck, plus the team down in Sydney. So our structure's changed. I mean, we've spent the last couple of months evolving the agency offering as well. So we've now got creative team, production team, content, social and influencer team. And, of course, the media landscape has completely transformed, and the way that agencies are working together. And I guess the bit that's always been good for us is talkability was always about ideas that were creatively led. We happened in the old days to deliver them through PR because that's what we knew. And now the best ideas are still brilliant creative, but there's more options for agencies to push those ideas all the way through the line. And that's the bit that's most exciting for us.
Yeah, that must be really exciting, actually. You've got like so many more channels to play with these days. Just talking a little bit more about how the management structure has changed for those of you, those of our listeners who haven't kind of been following the story. How's co-founder Graham Goodkind, what's his role now? He's still involved in the business.
Yeah,
right?
So Graham's still the chairman of the business. He has coined the term going plural. Basically means,
I read that. It's like, I don't know what he's talking about. But
yeah, no, neither did we at the time. And I don't think he did either. But we've all sort of figured out what that means, which basically means he's doing a day or so at Frank and then doing other stuff on the other days, playing a bit of golf as well.
A little bit.
So I hear.
Just a tiny bit. I know,
so his role really is, you know, to keep us on track, to look at the financial side of things to he's always been a big part of helping come up with creative ideas, that side of things. So he still dips his toe in that respect.
Been a really unconventional thinker. And I think it's the bit I noticed. I remember when I joined Frank was he was brilliantly creative and then also very good at long-term business vision. And so now actually in his role he comes in and he's quite challenging with us on things that we might not otherwise have thought of, because we're in it day to day, 5 days a week, quite often more than 5 days a week. And I think him having a bit more distance from it and maybe his plurality means that sometimes he sees things that we might not otherwise have thought of.
What's it like? How do you guys work together? What's the dynamic there as
wonderfully?
As
Andrew and I sat together
partners?
for 10 years. I think we've sat next to each other.
It's quite natural. Personally speaking, I've worked with Graham for 25 odd years. So
that's enough, isn't it, frankly?
Yes and no. I mean, it's, when he discussed what he wanted to do, in some ways I sort of felt like I was losing an arm, and
I bet.
I still miss him immensely in that respect. But actually Alex and I have also worked really closely together for many years, and I think the thing that I noticed the most is Graham and I had a lot of sort of complementary skills. We overlapped in quite a lot of areas and it worked really well. We bounced really well off each other. And Alex and I, in a way, it's sort of a more natural split of roles that seems to work really, really well. So we both look after the client side of the business and basically sort of split the portfolio broadly between us. But then Alex naturally sort of sits on the running of the business side of things, whereas I look after more the creative side, the marketing side, the new business side of the business. And it just, I'm enjoying it. I can't answer for Alex.
Alex, are you enjoying it? That's the big question.
Yes, that's my notes say yes.
Alex is on message. He's loving every second of it. Tell me a bit more about how, 18 years is a big slice of the PR industry. It's still a fairly young business. How apart from the media landscape and social media and digital in particular, how has being in the business of PR changed over the past 18 to 20 years that you guys have been playing in this field?
I mean, trying not to use sort of all the cliches that are out there, I do think PR's grown up a bit. Certainly its perception amongst kind of industry leaders outside of the industry, business leaders, I think it's taken more seriously. I think, one of the more recent changes has been sort of companies realise that their reputation is important. I mean, they probably always realised that, but now the way things have gone, you can't choose to ignore that. And there's definitely been, I guess, the lines between what is corporate PR, what is consumer PR, what is CSR, they've sort of fallen down. And, a lot of the work we're doing covers so many different areas. So, and I think that's been great for the industry. I find more and more we're right at the top level, helping companies, business leaders, brands sort of define how they should be positioning themselves to consumers. And it goes beyond that kind of the days of us, PRing an ad campaign or putting out a statement on behalf of a company that they've told us to put out. That sort of seems to be gone.
Yeah.
Agencies have also learnt to play nicer together.
In terms of what?
So,
the marketing disciplines, you mean?
Yeah. So if you're in a cross-agency function, everyone now has an aligned view, aligned vision. Everyone appreciates the skill set that the different agencies around the table bring. And you work towards a common goal of delivering best possible campaign.
Does it matter? Do clients care where the creative idea comes from?
Less and less so. Now they're just after best creative. And particularly with the integrated campaigns that we're working on, quite often they will brief all the agencies at the same time. And sometimes actually the agencies work together on what we believe the best creative is, and then how everyone can play off that creative.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about creativity and what that means at Frank, because that's just a word that's bandied around an awful lot. What does being creative and the best creative mean at Frank in terms of the work you do for clients?
Pause. It's a big question. for us, creativity is as simple as a great idea. But a great idea that on the face of it is simple is often very complex. So for me, there's lots of factors that make a creative idea. It can't be creativity for the sake of creativity. It has to have a strategic insight behind it. The brand has to be inextricably linked to the idea, so people remember who did it and why they did it. And it's an idea that, to use our favourite word, talkability, has talkability within it, so that it will be shared, and effectively your consumers, your customers, are doing your best marketing for you as they share that idea and take it on board as their own.
What about you, Alex? What's creativity mean for you?
It depends on the brand. So sometimes I think great creative is something that makes you smile. Sometimes it's something that resonates with personal beliefs. Some might be something that you see going on, a trend or an insight. The thing that I love the most is when we don't start out with what do we think is a good PR idea. We just say what would be a great idea for this brand.
Right. And
sometimes the starting point is not even what's on the brief. It's just brand X. We love that brand. Wouldn't it be amazing if they did this?
Yeah, well, that's quite a real conversation that consumers would have as well. When you've got a relationship with a brand, you kind of want it to do well, and you maybe think of ideas that are nothing to do with the brief going forward.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some of the ideas we've had over the years that have really landed come from like an everyday experience. And we were talking earlier about the number of children that I have, but actually watching the way kids interact, experiences that they have, things that they say, that old kids say the funniest things, but like real truth from the mouth of babes, and that's been the starting point for quite a few of our good ideas over the years.
I was just thinking, like when we started, we were obviously small and desperate to win any piece of business we could.
Small and desperate.
We're still desperate. But we would challenge every brief, and you'd see a brief and a client would want a press office or a listings campaign, and we were so desperate, not necessarily to win the business, but to do great work, that if the brief didn't give us the opportunity to do that, we would challenge it. And then I think you get to a stage where you've done lots of good work and a brief comes in, and it's not laziness, but you can get in the pattern of just responding to a brief. And actually in the last couple of years, we've forced ourselves to get back into that mindset of challenging clients in order to be able to do the best work. And I think that's maybe because there's so many new opportunities, channels, techniques, ways of doing things that we really want to be able to do that. And so if the opportunity isn't in the brief and we think it's the right response, we've got back into that sort of challenger mindset.
Do say to our clients, the name is above the door. Like, I mean, Frank by name, Frank by nature. No one at Frank called Frank, and I don't think there ever has been anyone at Frank called Frank. So actually, if that's the opening line to our creds, and that's what we say to everyone who works in the agency as well, as be frank, like challenge it. If you don't believe in it, say so, be open, honest, no nonsense. We'd much rather say to a client, we don't think your brief's right, we don't think this idea is right, give us an hour a day, a week, we'll come up with something else, than proceed with something we don't really believe in, isn't going to deliver the right results. The end result will be the agency gets fired anyway. So we're much better off from the start saying, we don't think this is right, we'd rather come up with something else.
And tell me, let's circle back to this whole talkability proposition, because you've summarised it a little bit. But where did that come from? And we've spoken before, Andrew, about how Frank maybe not lost its way, but just sort of that wasn't coming to the fore for a few years, and you've really kind of built that back up into what you guys are all about now in the most recent couple of years. Tell me about talkability and the journey you've been on there.
So, at one stage, we were going to call the agency Talkability.
Okay.
But then we thought it sounded a bit like a mobile phone company.
It does sound a little bit like Talk,
so
doesn't
it does. So we called it Frank instead, which was a good decision. We always believed from the outset that the best ideas were the ones that got talked about. And then it's not just a word that we have the trademark in and it's registered to Frank. There's a bit more behind it too. So we developed a whole kind of proprietary strategic structure around coming up with creative ideas that had that sort of magic ingredient of talkability, and it involves playing around with different triggers. And effectively what it does is it just gets your mind thinking in different ways. And it sort of came about because Graham and I used to just spend time locked in a room and would naturally follow a process that just kind of worked for us. And we knew how each other thought, and it would normally involve one of us abusing the other one until we ended up with an idea we liked. And then we realised it was quite hard to replicate that when we weren't around, or even if it was one of us with someone else. So we started to sort of put it down on paper, and it's really about disruptive thinking. And then following on from that, there is a process with the equally catchy sort of title of makeability. So what that is all about is it's all very well to have a good idea, but if there's no outlet to get that published, written about, then it's kind of pointless, and lots of good ideas die because they don't fit in with the media agenda or digital agenda. So makeability is about understanding the principles of what makes a great story and what will help a story spread. So you kind of combine these two things together, and an idea pops out at the end of it. And now it's a process that is followed throughout the agency. We've got a creative director now, which is kind of the first time Frank's actually had a creative director in its history. And for many years we sort of resisted the temptation of doing it because we were worried that it would become the responsibility of one person, and other people would think, oh, it's not my job to be creative. And we really do, and still do, truly believe that everyone within the organisation has a responsibility to be creative, even if they say, I'm not creative. Everyone is to a degree. And the best ideas often come from random people who say they're not creative, that trigger an idea or a thought. And so what our creative director, Graham Anthony, has done is helped build this process into everyone's thinking and enable them. You know, sometimes when people don't know how to start coming up with an idea, you know, they sit in a room and do, you know, a brainstorm, and it just kind of meanders around. If you follow the talkability process, it will take you down a road that will get you to ideas easier and put some structure around that creative process. So it is important.
It's quite counterintuitive, isn't it, having a rigorous process to come up with creative magic?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how rigorous it is. It's kind of more a structure to enable you to think, but then the process around it is still pretty chaotic and fluid. So,
and I think we also recognise, you know, one of the things when it comes to people, we quite often get asked what makes a Frank person, and there isn't one. You know, we went through a stage where we sort of talked about ourselves as like a stray cat's home. You know, we were just looking for interesting people, and the whole Frank.
It's an image, isn't it?
Yeah. But the Frank proposition is, you know, when you're at your most relaxed and you feel you're most comfortable, that's when you'll do your best work. And so, in theory, if we were to fill this room with people from Frank, we would end up with a dozen people with different ideas, different attitudes, different interests, chuck all of that at a brief, and suddenly you start to get some quite interesting insights and ideas. Well,
there's that old argument, new argument, isn't there, that you can't come up with truly diverse creativity without having diversity of thought at the very least within the agency.
And that's part of the reason also for Manchester and Glasgow and Australia. You know, it's amazing. I was chatting to Laura, who's the MD of Frank Oz, and I was walking home last night and it was 1 degree and it was freezing. And she had just finished a gym class and was telling me how it was the start of summer and she was getting on her bike to cycle to the office at 6:45 in the morning. And so, of course, her current outlook on life living over in Sydney is totally different to ours over here in London.
I'd forgotten, I must admit, that talkability was your trademark. Do you pick people up on using it, like without the capital T and the TM at the end of it?
We have introduced on our website the Talkability Enforcement Agency, which allows people to anonymously shop others that use the name. And it's a bit of fun, really. I mean, we do own the rights to the name in certain categories. But over the years, so many people, I mean, it's brilliant when a client says to us, oh, I was at X agency and they used the word talkability. I've told them it was yours. And it's a bit of a laugh, really. But it's amazing since this Twitter tool has come into effect, the names that come through of agencies. And it's
people actually using it.
Yeah. I mean, not in their hundreds and thousands, but there's been half a dozen or so.
Such a gossipy industry.
It's just a bit of fun. But it's not just PR agencies, it's ad agencies, media agencies. But
it's nice when something that sort of originated at Frank ends up in vernacular.
Yeah.
It's great.
Oh no, properly in the vernacular now. I mean, it's like, nobody uses it with a capital T. It's as simple as that. So give me an example of, until you're enforcing them to use that. Can you give me an example each of what you think one of Frank's most talkable campaigns have been? Andrew. Alex, do you want to kick off?
I could go first.
I'll let Andrew
Shall I go from history?
Go from history, way back in the mists of time.
History. So way back in... my favourite Frank campaign, and the one that put us on the map, really, was a campaign we did for HP Source. So this is actually a lovely example of challenging a brief. So HP Source, you kind of either like it or you don't like it. We had a fairly mundane brief to look at kind of what recipe ingredients we could create to promote increased usage of HP Source.
Oh gosh, that old chestnut.
And it was kind of, I'm not much of a cook. It was going to be a difficult brief to answer. But actually we looked at the emotional side of the brand, and we kind of, I guess our thought process was you do like it or you don't like it. Part of the problem is if it's not front of mind, you just don't necessarily think about using it. And if we could bring the brand to the front of mind and build some sort of warmth around it, that would increase usage. That was the kind of theory. So HP, very British brand, quintessentially British, actually has the Houses of Parliament on the bottle.
Yeah.
We looked at other British things that we could align ourselves with. Came up with the sport of snooker. It was the World Snooker Championships were taking place, and we decided we would attempt to be the first ever brand to sponsor a ball in snooker.
Okay.
Obviously the brown ball.
So
we approached the World Snooker Organisation, convinced them that we could sponsor the ball. So all the practice balls, when the players were sort of warming up for their games, would have HP Source logos. And then we felt that wasn't going far enough. So the iconic British snooker player Jimmy White, we approached him and we said, would you consider changing your name to Jimmy Brown for the duration of the tournament? Miraculously, he agreed, and he changed his name officially via Depot. And then to provoke the talkability and really get it going, we sent legal letters to all of the broadcasters and media covering the tournament to say that, from Jimmy, saying, I've changed my name to Jimmy Brown. This is what you need to refer to me as for the duration of the tournament. BBC played right into our hands, said this is ridiculous, we can't do anything like this, it's commercial, we couldn't possibly promote a sponsor. We wrote back saying, what are you talking about? It's a colour, and this is my name, you have to refer to me by my name. It kind of ended up with them referring to him as the Whirlwind.
Right.
Because he said he would walk out if they called him Jimmy White. And they didn't want to call him Jimmy Brown. So he was just known as the Whirlwind for a tournament. And all the captions, everything on the TV referred to the Whirlwind, because that was his nickname. Jimmy the Whirlwind White was his nickname. And it was incredible. The campaign went absolutely everywhere. It got global coverage. For me, the moment when I knew it had really worked was we'd sort of blagged some tickets to go and watch the snooker at Wembley. And I remember walking up with Graham, actually, into the arena where you see all the kind of merchandise stands selling gear. And there was Jimmy Brown T-shirts, Jimmy Brown scarves, nothing to do with us. And I was like, wow, this has really entered public consciousness.
Yeah, when there's merch, you know you've made it.
You know you've made it when there's merch and you haven't paid for the merch.
Yeah.
So I think we own half of that merch now. We're so excited we bought it all up. But that, for me, was an amazing campaign. It did a brilliant job for HP. They saw their sales increase, I think it was 7 or 8%, which was the biggest increase they'd seen.
That's amazing
in the history of the brand.
Well,
Don't quote me on that because it was a long time ago, but it did well.
Yeah.
And then following on from that, we did a load of campaigns from them. We saved the British calf from the influx of, well, the campaign was actually codenamed Fuck the Frappuccino because Starbucks were kind of coming in on our high street and threatening British calves, so we wanted to save them, so we did that. We got Paul Smith to design a limited edition bottle of HP sauce, and there was 1,899 because it was 1899 was the year HP was founded, so which was sold exclusively in Harrods and auctioned off on eBay for thousands of pounds.
Wow.
Still have one in my drawer if anyone wants to put a bid in. Yeah, it's my retirement plan. It's number one,
investment.
Signed by Paul Smith. So I'm just waiting for the right moment to flog it. So for us, that was brilliant. It won PR Week Campaign of the Year. I think it was 2004 or 5. But for me, that it sort of exemplifies what talkability is all about. It was a campaign that really took on a life of its own and we weren't even having to do anything. It was every sort of newspaper columnist was talking about it, broadcasters were talking about it. But from a frank perspective, put us on the map and was the campaign that really got us noticed. And soon after that, we kind of shot up in terms of the type of clients, type of work we were doing.
It took HP beyond the sausage sandwich. Which
exactly, and I still love HP sauce.
What about you, Alex? What's been your most talkable campaign you've worked on?
So I'll talk about more recent stuff.
Okay.
So I referenced earlier, sometimes like a great creative idea comes from a nice little insight, something you observe. So we took my boys to go and see Father Christmas. And first thing Father Christmas says when he meets boys and girls is, have you been a good boy or a good girl? And the kids nod furiously and the parents stand in the background like shaking their heads. And so we realised the first thing kids do when they meet Father Christmas is lie.
Right.
So we look after Hammerson shopping centres, of which there are 10 across the UK. They have Christmas grottos. So we introduced a lie detector test for kids before they went in to meet Father Christmas.
That's outrageous.
And kids that passed would get a present and kids that didn't would not. Anyway, so that was one of those stories that just took off, went around the world, all over TV and in the States, in Russia. I mean, we were getting news clippings through that we couldn't read, but was a brilliant piece of work. And then even more recently, we did a great piece of work for Green Flag last year. And this is a football-based idea, so it's probably bad for me to explain it because I don't really follow football. But Green Flag we were running a promotional offer whereby if you had your breakdown covered with the AA or the RAC and you switched to Green Flag, you would get 50% off. So why would you not switch? So we said, okay, well, to bring this offer to life, we will dramatise the impossible switch and we'll see if we can get a football fan to swap their allegiance of their team. Ooh. So during North London derby, which Arsenal Spurs, we took over a pub, filled one half of the room with Spurs fans, one half of the room with Gooners, and then we brought in a hypnotist who would hypnotise those who were susceptible to swap their allegiance at half-time, filmed the whole thing, released the content overnight, and it went absolutely everywhere, and we won a couple of awards for that last year as well. So I think for us, and that's a great example of fun, insight-led, tapping into cultural, sporting moment, but doing it with a twist.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about other agencies? Who else do you admire? Who's doing good stuff at the moment that you've seen?
I mean, there's so many agencies doing exciting work. And for me, I love the agencies that are taking on the rest of the marketing world and sort of crossing over the boundaries of what people perhaps previously thought wasn't the domain of PR agencies.
Yeah.
Taylor Herring is my favourite agency.
Good example.
In terms of creativity. And I think they are banging out campaign after campaign, really good PR stunts, but using different techniques to get them out there, whether it's digital or even sort of producing TV ads, experiential, and they just, I think more than any other agency, put a smile on my face with some of the work. I love the Beano and Water the Softie campaign they did with Jacob Rees-Mogg and so many others as well. So they're doing a really nice job. There's some ex-Frankers that have set up agencies and doing really well. So Lizzie Earle, who used to work at Frankers.
She's amazing, isn't she?
She is amazing.
Shortlisted for our best new agency this year. She's doing cracking work.
Yeah, and she won Best New Agency PR Week Award. So I think she's doing some really nice work and is a lovely person. David Fraser is doing really well, who used to be at Frank and has set up Ready 10. Alex, and who's your favourites?
I mean, look, I suppose you name check PR agencies. I look at like some of the brand work that's getting done for Nike, and I think consistently Whedon are knocking it out of the park. Like, it's amazing the stuff that they're doing, and I'm also a big fan of the brand, so I follow it closely. I love their work. I think Droga 5 are doing amazing stuff as well for Under Armour. And then, Home Market. I mean, there are also a lot of ex-Frankers over at Mischief, and I think they've been having a brilliant run.
Definitely.
And also really looking forward to seeing what Katie Stolliday and Nick Gavier are going to do over at Blurred.
Yeah, absolutely, with Stuart Lambert as well from my old Weber mucker. So that's a bit of a dream team, isn't it? It'll be really interesting to see how they evolve with the Blurred boundaries. Great name as well.
Yes.
So let's tell me a little bit about you guys then. Now, Alex, you had a comment about Andrew's use of social media earlier.
Wasn't really for being repeated.
Andrew obviously likes to tweet a lot. And
you've got like how many million followers have you got? It's insane. It's ridiculous.
Just about 950,000 short of 1 million, but I'll get there.
Yeah. Now, Andrew is obviously a prolific tweeter. But I have to say, actually, it's brilliant for Frank as an agency, and how can we sit credibly in front of our clients and talk to them about effective use of social when I hate to use the term influencer because it goes straight to his head. But, we have got probably the industry's biggest tweeter, or most influential person on Twitter, sat in the office. So, yes, Andrew occasionally will tweet something interesting. But it's funny how many new business leads we get as a result of Andrew's Twitter, and likewise job inquiries too.
Yeah. I think clients really respect when they can see the people behind the agencies talking and having an opinion. I mean, in all seriousness, it is primarily work. I try not to say anything too controversial or opinionated. But actually, for years, we didn't have a Frank social media presence because I think it always came from, you just look at a lot of agencies' social feeds and they're quite boring, and it's, pizza for lunch, cake for tea, and it's all, nice stuff that within the agency they're happy about, and it's sharing, but it's a bit introspective, and we were just unsure how we would. Frank has this almost, we like to call it professionally unprofessional as a brand.
Okay.
In that we just do things that on the face of it look like they haven't had a lot of thought or any thought put behind them, but they have actually been well planned and well thought out, and people speak, as Alex said earlier, we allow people to be themselves and not feel like they have to conform to any particular agency stereotype or what they think they should be. I always felt that was quite hard to get across on a Twitter feed. But having said that, we became conscious of the fact my Twitter feed is my Twitter feed. Although it's 95% work, it doesn't necessarily reflect the views of Frank. They're my personal opinions and thoughts. And I'd almost become the voice for Frank, which is not something I intended to do or wanted to do. So how long ago? I mean, within the last year or so, we've really worked on our social channels and tried to not talk about pizza and cake and just share our work. And it's actually had a pretty good response. We should have probably done it 5 years ago.
It's a good way for us to share the stuff that we're proud of. And I think as the agency has grown up, we did turn 18, our social channels perhaps reflect more of a professionally professional approach.
Well, there is an art to looking like nothing's going on, isn't there, as well?
There is. there is. We've always had a strong brand, and sometimes you can say too much and do too much and talk for the sake of talking, and it's better just to sort of hold back and have an element of mystery to what you do. But there's a balance, and like Alex said, we've won significant clients directly off the back of stuff they've seen about us on social media. And in today's world, your own channels are as important as Homes Report, PR Week, any other industry title, PR Moment, are all important to us. However, we have our own channel that we can control and use at the same time, and working the two side by side has been our best marketing for
Absolutely.
us.
Get that balance between earned, owned and paid right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So everyone's wrestling with that one. Well, thank you both very much for coming into the Echo Chamber. It's been lovely to have a glimpse into the world of Frank, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Echo Chamber. Brought to you by the Homes Report and produced by Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.